In this episode, we once again talk about Mission Impossible's Final Reckoning. And by we, I mean me and you, because in the last ep I did on this subject, which I'll link to at the end of this one, it was apparent people had some thoughts, really interesting thoughts. And so not only do I want to hear your continued thoughts about the subject of this episode, which is villains, it also made me think it could be fun to hear your ideas about how you would rearrange Final Reckoning if it were up to you. I'm Bede, I'm a screenwriter, and here at Pillarboxer we look at movies and series specifically from a storytelling point of view. If that sounds like you, join the conversation below. This is not a who would win in a fight video, although that would be pretty cool. Maybe they'll make a movie out of that one day. But rather, no, this is about another equally crucial question, and that is, does Final Reckoning have a villain problem? There is an age-old adage that goes like this: your hero is only as good as your villain. Meaning, if your bad guy is meh, we will never truly be worried for our hero. And if they're not tested, they won't earn our investment, or our empathy, or concern, or admiration. But I'm not here to accuse Final Reckoning's villain, the entity, of being meh. And there is an argument to say that he's not the villain at all, and is rather just a weapon, or even a MacGuffin. But this might be part of the problem, which we'll come to. First, we have to talk about what the entity is, or isn't. Final Reckoning's villain is software that is faceless and shapeless and ambiguous, without a relatable want. It's intangible. You can't see it, you can't touch it, you can't even really hate it. This is compounded by its name. I mean, it's called the entity, which might be one of the vaguest words in the English language. Killer. Now that's a word that drives a nail into wood. Terminator. Terrorist. Fanatic. Psychopath. Monster. Anarchist. Stalker. Even traitor. Or mercenary. Or extremist. These are tangible words. An entity, it's a bit like calling your villain the placeholder. Counterintuitive, but I think it might have been more effective if it was called DX12 or some other techno babble, because it would feel real. I could believe it. Regardless, this highlights a major issue, which is when dealing with a thing instead of a person, and worse, a group thing, the danger becomes abstract or conceptual, and often emotionally distant. Others have had this problem and solved it. Obviously, it's hard to find a like for Final Reckoning because it's uniquely a spy action thriller, which is another part of the problem we'll come to. But just in terms of big popcorn event films, one of the better comparisons to make, at least to illustrate the point, is the machines in The Matrix. Skynet in the Terminator franchise is another obvious one, and maybe that could be the sequel to The Machines versus the Entity. Winner takes on Skynet. The Wachowskis understood the problem intuitively when writing The Matrix, and that is this: human traits make things more personal. Through thousands of years of evolution, we have become hardwired to react emotionally to faces and voices and intentions we can relate to. Human traits naturally and easily trigger our fight or flight response. And this is not just about genre movies. In more grounded stories too, heroes tend not to face off against sinister government departments or big corporations. They face off against the people who work for them. And thus, Agent Smith is born. And immediately makes us squirm. Because the enemy is tangible and sharply defined. That thing behind him, the machines, drives him, but it's not our true antagonist. Here's another obvious example.
Sarah Connor?
Yes?
And in both movies, despite the later world-building reveal of the larger enemy that created them, they remain the central focus and obstacle to our heroes. The entity, by contrast, in the words of Denlinger in Dead Reckoning, is an enemy that is everywhere.
An enemy that is everywhere and nowhere.
And nowhere and has no center. Now, all of this is a problem, potentially a big problem, but is it the real problem? Or is the real problem simply that I'm not worried? Why am I not scared of this thing? Nuclear war is real. Even AI starting it is potentially real at this point. The entity is not a pushover. It's all powerful, and I believe it can invoke nuclear war, and that's as scary as it gets. So why don't I feel it? I think it's because we don't get scenes where the reality of that threat plays out. Instead, we get told about it. In screenwriting, this is called reporting, which is when you let the audience in on something that happens off screen. And as a writer, if you're doing this, it's usually because you're forced to for other reasons, often because you've got story problems elsewhere, usually structural. The problem with reporting information to the audience is they take it in intellectually, but they don't feel it emotionally. Information we file, but each time we feel something, it's a tension that will ratchet and build, and all of it only released at the end of the movie. Information, by contrast, doesn't... If I texted you and told you someone you love had been tragically killed by a lightning strike, it would be shocking, traumatic, and devastating. But it would be nothing next to you standing in a field in the rain and seeing the person you love wail as they are fried right in front of you by electricity from the sky. Sorry about that image, but I just wanted to make a point about reporting versus experiencing. So, a simple change there is to see that nuclear threat play out in real time, but not just play out in some abstract theoretical way. And I don't just mean see a city blow up. I think we've seen that too many times to be rattled by it. I mean in a small, human, personal way, because we are small, human persons. A way that actually threatens us, the viewer. A way that crawls out of the screen into my neighborhood, up to my door, to my family. I wonder if the best way to do that is not with a global set piece, but a small domestic set piece. War of the Worlds did this effectively by showing a literal neighborhood we can identify with. And later a family basement. How do you make a viewer feel unsafe? By invading the space they feel safest. Horror films are masters at this, bringing the threat into your house, usually into your bedroom. These are different genres, but all take something existential or global or abstract and make it personal. Because it doesn't matter how fantastical or removed from reality the story is, the good ones still place us in it, so that we feel that threat in our bones. But wait, isn't the entity just a weapon? The stakes? Not the actual bad guy? I mean, Denlinger does say this, after all.
The AI our agents stole, once weaponized, could be transmitted anywhere in the world via satellite. Can penetrate any network security, perform its assigned task invisibly, and then self-destruct, leaving no trace.
A perfect covert operative.
Let's suppose for a minute that is the case, and it makes total sense. It would be why we have our other antagonists, like the wild-eyed, obsessed acolytes of an algorithm, which could be any content creator, actually, and, of course, Gabriel. But if that's the case, then now we have a different problem. S.I. Morales is a charismatic actor with a wonderful screen presence, so no shade there. But the character itself comes from the moustache-twirling school of villains, while the most effective bad guys in the franchise, and maybe any action thriller, are the ones who are chilling. I'm thinking of Philip Seymour Hoffman as Davian. I mean, look at those eyes, geez. Look how still he is.
No. 10.
And of course, Sean Harris as Solomon Lane with that voice.
Don't kill
understand at least what people think or feel. In my experience, they don't do either for very long.
Objectively terrifying. It's that blank-eyed nothingness, ironically machine-like, that triggers our fight or flight response. Maybe a good rule of thumb is that a machine needs to be human-like to be unnerving, and a human needs to be machine-like. Even Jackie Weaver in Animal Kingdom with her Nan-by-the-pool smile is still blank behind the eyes. I did worry about Ethan drowning in this movie. I worried he'd die of frostbite, decompression sickness, falling to his death, suffering concussion in his underwear even, but I never worried about Gabriel beating him. And your hero is only as good as your villain. So, if Gabriel is the villain...
Around 2019, as we were beginning work on Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning, and I felt like we were ready to introduce it as the villain of our film.
Okay, that settles that. Which makes sense. The moment you introduce the fact that the entity is sentient and has motivation and an agenda, it has to become your main big bad. Which is why there's less focus on Gabriel, which means he's off the hook. Which brings us at last to what I think is the real issue, and that is this. Should AI be anywhere near a spy action thriller? On the face of it, it sounds logical. A big part of the spy genre is tech. And it's not like this idea is fantasy anymore. AI has gone from being a sci-fi trope to something your mum uses as a therapist. The threats are all too real, but Mission Impossible isn't a near-future sci-fi, and it's not an exploration of our relationship with machines, or an examination of military hubris and the madness of mutually assured destruction. It's a spy movie. It's a spy movie. I know, not just any spy movie, but a spy movie nonetheless. So, when the entity becomes not just a weapon, but the true antagonist, by introducing its sentience, I am being placed ever so slightly outside of the genre I came to see, just enough to make me wonder if I'm getting what I paid for. Interestingly, I don't feel like this when it's just an algorithm that gives a bad guy control over powerful networks, which feels grounded. But the moment it becomes self-aware and has an agenda of its own and is motivated, that's the moment. That's the moment it loses me. Which is ironic because the moment we hear the entity speak in Final Reckoning is the moment I finally feel some threat. It's the moment that threat comes alive, literally, because it's anthropomorphized, humanized. And the director, McHugh, knew this too.
What I discovered was the essence of that sequence, and what made it work was sound. And the way my sound team had discovered a way to mix that voice, particularly when you're sitting in a Dolby Atmos theater.
But that's the rub. The moment it became sentient, it was no longer just a weapon, it was an antagonist. But the moment it was an antagonist, it needed a face, or a voice, or autonomy. But the moment it gained a voice and autonomy, it stopped being part of the genre. Perhaps the greatest crime is not what the entity's called, or that Gabriel is not so threatening, or that the acolytes are barely there. It's that we slipped genres. You personally might be completely unbothered about the entity being sentient, but on the whole, it's been proven the hard way that you mess with the genre at the movie's peril. This is because of audience expectation. The equation for the perfect film is deceptively simple. Give the audience what they came to see, but in a way they've never seen it before. If you break one or the other of these two pillars, it doesn't work. When you mess with the genre, you mess with the came to see part, even if you mess with it just a little. Genre helps the audience decide what to go see. Genre is another word for mood, as in, what are you in the mood for? And if you don't deliver on the genre, you don't deliver on the mood. Like you're in the mood for ice cream and you get custard. It's not that you hate custard, you love custard. It's just that you wanted some damn ice cream, man. In The Matrix, we are oriented from the first minutes for the genre we came to see. We have also seen the trailers and are here for it. So when Agent Smith appears, expectation and delivery are in alignment. Some people are completely chill. You likely have people like this in your life. Okay, it's custard, not ice cream for dessert. I don't mind as long as I get a sugar hit. But for the majority, genre is critical, and it's why, circling back to the title of this episode, it's ultimately unfair to compare Final Reckoning to The Matrix. They are different genres. But that's kind of the point. The Matrix delivered on what the audience came to see in a way they hadn't seen before. In Final Reckoning, the moment sentience was introduced, the genre, the mood, was off by a couple of degrees. Yes, we are talking about the tiniest of little dials here. If the entity was just a super weapon and behaved like a computer virus without a motive, and maybe had a different name and focus was on the human villain, the whole thing might better deliver. But, you know, here on this channel we are into the tiniest of dials. I'm nerding. Let me nerd. If you loved and feared the entity and thought it a worthy opponent to Ethan, that's genuinely awesome. But if it didn't work for you, the problem might likely be summed up in a word: sensory. Something that you can reach out and touch, because if you can touch it, it can touch you. And if it can't touch you, you don't fear it. In writers' rooms, we don't talk about something being good or bad. That's for the universe to decide. We talk about what works and what doesn't work. Story is just a mechanism that gives an audience a certain experience. An experience is a series of emotions in a certain order, and the story mechanism works when it reliably delivers that experience for the majority. And all of that matters because the audience is all that matters. So that's what I want to do here. Treat this like a writer's room. Throw movie story ideas around, turn them upside down and inside out, not to hate on them, but to find something new and interesting. So here's a genuine question. Is the answer not to have AI, but simply a technical superweapon? Or is the answer to keep AI, but dial up its representative, Agent Smith style? Let me know what you think, and suggest other films that you think dealt with this group enemy versus individual enemy conundrum effectively. But also your suggestions for how you'd rearrange this movie if it were up to you, and upvote your favorite ideas, and who knows, maybe some kind of consensus might form. In the meantime, if you haven't seen it already, watch the other episode I did dedicated to Final Reckoning, talking about how it started and how it's going. And if you subscribe in the next 24 hours, you get a free feeling of inclusion.